There are parts of the Scottish Highlands where certain ideas have been held for a very long time. Among them is the belief that the visible world is not complete and that under certain conditions it can open into something else. In the late 17th century, a minister working in one of those regions began to take that possibility seriously enough to document it. His name was Robert Kirk. Kirk was born in 1644 in Aberfoyle in Perthshire into a Gaelic-speaking environment where older traditions remained closely tied to the landscape. He later studied at the University of Edinburgh and was ordained as a minister in the Church of Scotland in the 1660s, eventually returning to serve in Aberfoyle. His role required him to operate within a Protestant framework of doctrine and order, but it didn't prevent him from engaging with the beliefs that persisted among the people he ministered to. These beliefs were not abstract. They were part of daily life, expressed through consistent accounts of unusual experiences tied to specific places and conditions. People spoke of encountering figures near burial mounds or hillsides at twilight, of hearing voices or music without any clear source, and of seeing processions that appeared briefly and then dissolved. Others described moments of altered perception, glimpses of events before they occurred, or a sudden awareness of presences that could not be seen in any ordinary sense. Within Gaelic tradition, these experiences were often associated with the Aishe, sometimes translated as the people of the mounds, understood not as distant supernatural beings but as part of a parallel order of existence. Access to this order was thought to occur intermittently, particularly through what was known as second sight, a faculty attributed to certain individuals believed to perceive beyond the usual limits of vision. Kirk did not dismiss these accounts, which in itself was unusual for a minister of his position, nor did he accept them uncritically. Instead, he approached them in a methodical way. He gathered testimonies from parishioners and local inhabitants, compared descriptions, noted recurring details, and attempted to identify patterns in how and when such experiences were reported. His aim was not simply to validate belief, but to understand its structure. This work culminated in a manuscript completed shortly before his death in 1692, now known as the Secret Commonwealth. The text is measured in tone and careful in its claims. It doesn't read like folklore in the conventional sense, but more like an attempt to describe a set of observations that resist easy classification. Kirk outlines the possibility that forms of intelligence may exist alongside human life that are not ordinarily perceptible, yet are not entirely separate from it. He treats reports of second sight as a kind of data, imperfect, inconsistent, but not without meaning. What stands out is his restraint. He avoids firm conclusions, acknowledges uncertainty, and writes as though aware that the subject exceeds the language available to describe it. In 1692, shortly after completing the manuscript, Kirk died under circumstances that, even in their simplest form, leave room for uncertainty. It is generally accepted that he collapsed while walking near Doon Hill, a wooded rise on the outskirts of Aberfoyle, long associated with local folklore. His body was recovered and buried, and by official accounts that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Almost immediately, an alternative account began to circulate, one rooted in the same body of belief Kirk had spent years documenting. According to this tradition, he had not simply died, but he had been taken by the Aishe. In Highland folklore, such takings were not unheard of. They were described as sudden, often occurring in liminal places near mounds, hills, or thresholds between cultivated land and open ground. A person might appear to collapse or die outwardly, while their presence was believed to have been drawn elsewhere, into a parallel order of existence that operated by different conditions. Kirk's death, in this context, was understood less as an end than a transition. It was said that his sustained attention to the unseen had made him visible in return, that in studying these accounts so closely he had crossed from observation into participation. Some versions of the story go further. They suggest that after his burial, Kirk was seen again, briefly, by a relative, not as a ghost in the usual sense, but as something present and inaccessible at the same time, as though separated by a boundary that could not easily be crossed back. In these accounts, there was said to be a narrow opportunity to retrieve him, involving a precise action carried out at the moment of a second passing, but it was either not understood or not completed in time. Other tellings suggest that what was buried was not entirely him, but a kind of substitute, something akin to what folklore would later describe as a changeling, where a physical form remains while something essential has been removed. These variations cannot be verified, but they follow a consistent internal logic, one already present in the beliefs Kirk himself recorded. Doon Hill, where he is said to have collapsed, remains closely associated with these traditions. It is still regarded locally as a place connected with the ASG, and Kirk's name has never fully separated from that association. The idea persists that his death was not simply coincidental, but connected to the subject of his work, that there may be limits to how closely such things can be observed without consequence. None of this can be established in a conventional historical sense. It belongs to oral tradition, shaped over time and resistant to fixed interpretation. What can be established is more limited. Robert Kirk existed. He was a minister of the Church of Scotland, a scholar of Gaelic language and tradition, and the author of a text that treats local belief as a form of structured observation rather than simple superstition. The rest remains open. What gives that openness its persistence is not proof, but its alignment with a reoccurring idea that perception may not be fixed, and that sustained attention to its limits can begin to alter what is experienced. Kirk's work remains at that boundary. It doesn't resolve the question it raises, but records it with unusual care, and in doing so it leaves something difficult to dismiss. If attention is sustained long enough at the edge of perception, what distinguishes observation from involvement, and at what point does one begin to pass into the other?